Hello again, football fans. This is Anthony coming at you with Two Fat Guys Fantasy Football. We're going to be continuing our series of team offseason breakdowns today. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Miami Dolphins, the second team that we've looked at that does not have a first round draft pick this year. So as always, let's jump right into it. Take a look at what this season looked like at the end of the year. So the Dolphins is an interesting team. They are arguably one of the fastest teams in the NFL. Team speed all over on offense. Uh, Biggest names that jump out: Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Raheem Mostert also has perennially been one of the fastest guys in the NFL. So it's a team that's predicated on speed, almost as if it's built to play in Madden. So this is a roster that was very competitive. It was a very streaky roster. They would have times where they were very good, and they would have times where they were very uh, bad. And most of the times that they didn't look very good were the times when Tua was out injured, when they had to rely on Teddy Bridgewater to come in, who even got hurt, and then Skylar Thompson. The team didn't perform nearly as well as was expected. So it tells me a lot about Tua. It tells me that Tua is a quality quarterback in the NFL. He had some concerns after his rookie year, but he showed last year that he is capable of mastering and running an offense in a very good way. Um, the biggest question for him is going to be health. Um, as someone who has suffered from several concussions as well, I can tell you that it's nothing to joke about. And when you have a series of three concussions in what was it, 5 weeks, that's that's going to take a toll, and it does make you more susceptible to future head injuries. So I hope that everything works out for him. I want nothing but the best for him, but I do have my own personal concerns about his ability to stay healthy through a full NFL season. But if he can, he showed the ability last year um, to do very well. Tyreek Hill is one of the best receivers in the NFL still. Um, he's a guy that can do everything for you on the field. He's not just a one trick pony, a speed deep threat. He has developed as a route runner and has added several different options to his route tree. He is very elusive in the open field, very good with the ball in his hands. So he is just not much else to say about him. He's one of the best. Jalen Waddle is almost a carbon copy of Tyreek Hill. They're very similar style players. They're very similar size players, and Jalen Waddle can do a lot of the same things. He's arguably more elusive in the open field than Tyreek Hill, but Tyreek Hill is a little bit more refined at this stage of the career. But it's something that Jalen Waddle can develop, and I think he can grow into what Tyreek Hill is. The rest of the uh, wide receiver room, Trent Sherfield, was a guy who gave him some good quality play. On the other side, we also had Cedric Wilson, another guy that is capable and does fine. These are just kind of extra pieces for that offense. The offense mainly runs through your top two receivers and the running back room. Raheem Mostert is getting a little older, still has very good speed. He still looked good in this offense last year. But this is an offense that's very much a running back by committee. They traded for Jeff Wilson, brought him in. He's a guy that is very capable of being a starting running back in the NFL. So he gives them a little bit of a different look than Mostert. They even have Miles Gaskin, who does a few things a little bit differently as well. So they have three different styles of running backs, and they use all three of them. So it's a very unique offense in that aspect. They do keep a full-time fullback on the roster in Alec Ingold, who is one of the best fullbacks in the NFL. In the tight end room, Mike Gesicki is a guy that has all the talent in the world, but never seemed to ever put in a full productive season, at least for fantasy. He's a guy that got overlooked a lot. Um, Durham Smythe, another guy that uh, they like a lot. Kind of sees the field quite a bit as a second tight end, but nobody to get excited about. The offensive line is solid. Um, the addition of Teron Armstead a couple of years ago really strengthened this line a lot. He is one of the best left tackles around. Really is the anchor for that line on the outside. The rest of the line is solid, not great. Bobby Hunt is really fun to watch. He's a really good guard. Connor Williams, a decent anchor there. Liam Eichenberg is a guy that they're hoping can continue to develop, um, but he's just kind of looks like a guy. Definitely a spot that they could look to improve. And then Eric Fisher, it was kind of just a journeyman right tackle fill in. Austin Jackson is a younger guy that hasn't really panned out either. He took a shot and it just hasn't worked out. So they've got some guys. It's a solid line, not a great line. Definitely a spot that they could look to improve. On the defensive side of the ball, they have a lot of talent all over the field. Christian Wilkins is one of the most fun players for me to watch in the NFL on the D line. He's a rush end with D tackle size. He is one of the hardest working guys you'll see on the NFL field. You see him all over the place. He chases down plays, and a guy from that size, it's just fun to watch him leave it all out there. So he's a guy that can still even get better yet. He's still going to be going into his fifth year now, but he is a really fun player to watch. He's a valuable member of that defense. Uh, Raekwon Davis, another nice guy. Um, Emmanuel Ogba was brought in. Um, Zach Sealer is a name that gave them some quality time last year, but I think he's more just a he's just kind of a guy. I expect to see a lot more of Bradley Chubb kind of playing down at the end spot as a pass rush specialist. They did have Melvin Ingram as well. Nice veteran presence, a nice leadership, a nice mentor in the linebacker room. Jerome Baker is a really good middle linebacker, sideline to sideline tackler, good speed. He's a guy that, again, it's another guy that he's all over the field. When you watch their defense, you always see 55 around the ball. He's always making plays. And then on the other side of the defense, Jalen Phillips, who they drafted a couple years ago, is a guy that more of a pass rush linebacker than a coverage linebacker. So maybe he's mis-schemed in a 4-3, but he's a guy that plays extremely well. He plays hard. As the year got longer and later in the year, he's a guy that looked much better at the end of the year than he did at the beginning of the year. So maybe it took him a little bit to get used to the new schemes with McDaniel, but he's a guy that I'm interested to see how they use him this year. I think he's going to be kind of a pass rush specialist, kind of a disguised 3-4 is what I expect them to run. Um, but but yeah, it seems to be that's more what this defense is built for. Another nice veteran name, Andrew Van Ginkel, breakout star a couple of years ago. Last year wasn't uh, as impactful. Still a good player, still makes plays, but you didn't hear nearly as much about him last year as you did the previous year. In the secondary, has been a very solid group. Byron Jones, Xavier Howard, Nick Needham, and then the name I want to talk about, Kader Kohu, drafted out of Texas A&M Commerce. He was a rookie that wasn't expected to do a whole lot. He was a later round pick, but he was a hit. He has good speed, maybe a little bit smaller than you want him to be, but at 5'10", he's adequately sized. Really showed some good cover skills and showed some good ball skills as the course of the season went on. So he's a name that I want to continue to watch moving forward. If he can continue to develop a full off season in the program, I think will really help him a lot. I think he could develop into a really good third corner, a slot corner for the team. Javon Holland is one of my favorite draft picks from a few years ago. Love the kid. He is a prototype free safety. Great speed, great coverage skills, willing tackler. Is a nice kind of almost a captain of the defense out there. Gets the secondary lined up right, but he's a guy that can do it all in the secondary. A guy that can continue to develop, but he'll be in the conversation in the next couple of years as being one of the best safeties in the NFL if he's not already there for you. But if you're looking for a nice name in an IDP league, Javon Holland is a name that I like a fair bit this year. I think he can be a little bit better. Eric Rowe was the starting strong safety, which was adequate, which is what they needed. So as we look at this roster, I will say that this is a roster that is built to compete as long as Tua can stay healthy. They've got some tough competition in the AFC East with Buffalo being there, but they showed last year that they can go toe to toe with Buffalo and hang with them and take it to them. So let's take a look now and see what's happened with this roster since the offseason began. Um, as I mentioned before, this is a team that doesn't have a draft pick until 51, I believe, is their first pick. So they were really going to have to go into the offseason and kind of attack free agency the best way they could. What that meant was they brought back their entire running back room. All three of these guys were able to walk, and they re-signed all three of them. They brought in Braxton Berrios to be um, an additional piece in that wide receiver room. He's a guy that does a lot of the same types of things. He's a kind of a chess piece out there. Can run some jet sweeps. He's got an established route tree, but he's just a secondary, tertiary piece behind Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They're still the biggest names. Um, we did lose our right tackle Eric Fisher. Um, Replacement is Garen Christian Sr. Um, he's adequate. He's what I like to think of it is he's making sure that the Miami Dolphins don't have a glaring hole at the position into the draft. Something where they don't have to draft something just to plug a hole. He's a guy that's going to be a capable, if not elite level or great starter, he's a capable starter. The rest of the offensive line is unchanged. So uh, offensive line is still solid, not great. We did lose Mike Gesicki. He is no longer a part of the Dolphins, so tight end is an area where they could look to get a little bit better. But on defense, the biggest thing that we've done was we added Jalen Ramsey. Jalen Ramsey is still considered to be one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Um, Great size, great speed, great all-around skills. He's a good tackler. He's doesn't shy away from anything. He will cover your best player. He will cover the best zone. Whatever you need him to do, he is capable of doing it, and he makes this defense uh, definitely better than it was. Um, the defensive line, like I said, I expect them to run more of a disguised 3-4. So they lost a couple of depth pieces there, but for the most part, it remains unchanged. Linebacker room, again, mostly unchanged. We did bring in David Long out of Tennessee. Great value signing for them. It's another reason why I think they're going to be playing more of a 3-4 with Jerome Baker and David Long there in the center of the field. So I think that's going to free up Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb to be more of the pass rush specialists that they are. But David Long was a great signing for them in free agency. So the defense has gotten better. They continued to strengthen the defense by adding Deshaun Elliott at the strong safety spot. Got a little bit younger, got a little bit faster, and overall just got a little bit better at the position. So the Miami Dolphins is a team that, on paper, looks like they've gotten better since the offseason began, in my opinion. They do have some questions along the offensive line, but on defense, they strengthened their defense pretty considerably with the addition of Ramsey, Long, and Elliott. So this is a team that I expect to compete. I expect them to be very competitive. Again, that's all predicated on the health of Tua. They did bring in Mike White to back up Tua, a guy who has shown that he can come in with the Jets and win some games with the roster. And as good as the Jets roster has become, um, I believe that the Dolphins do still have a more talented offensive roster at this point. But the Jets is very good as well. So Mike White is a nice backup to have, a guy who can come in and win, and especially has shown that he can win in the AFC East. He can uh, beat the teams there. So let's take a look now at what they might look at doing in the draft. Like I said, they only have two picks in the top 100. I think it's like 51 and 83. So we're not looking at anything splashy. You're not, unless they try to bundle both of those to move up earlier into the second round, maybe into with a next year first get into the back end of the first round. But I don't think that's what they're looking to do. They've shown that they can kind of hit in the back end in the later rounds. So some guys that they might look at, tight end position might be someplace that they might look. A guy like Luke Musgrave, kind of a pure receiving tight end, seam threat, something that they could use there. Um, I like him. He's a little raw, so maybe that's not the way they go. Matt Bergeron is a name that they might look at to strengthen that offensive line. Um, Cody Mosh, if he's there, might be a guy that they look at to strengthen the offensive line. Interesting name would be Zach Kuntz, who is uh, kind of a, more raw than a lot of the tight ends, but he's more athletic than almost all of the tight ends. He's a guy that I like a lot in the middle rounds. I'd be interested to see where he goes for fantasy purposes, if he's more than just a late round kind of dart throw or a dynasty pickup. Another name, if they're looking for kind of a blocking piece on the tight end, would be Darnell Washington, another name that would be there probably in the second round as well. So tight end is a spot. Value Nick Breaker would be another name they could look at to help work on that offensive line some. Like I said, I think offensive line is probably their biggest weakness, with everything that they've done for it. But yeah, so another name that you might look at if you're just looking to go wide receiver, Cedric Tillman is a spot where it'd be a bad landing spot for fantasy, but probably a good spot for NFL football. Gives you something that the rest of your guys don't have in a little bit of size. Andrew Voorhees would be a nice name in this area. Um, Juju Brents might be another spot that you look at. Slot corner kind of guy, um, can play a little bit of safety for you. But you start to get out of talents that are elite and kind of instant impact. Sidy Sow is an interesting name, a guy out of Eastern Michigan who will need some time to develop, but I think he would be at least able to push the guys on the roster there to see if he can earn some playing time. Um, but you're really starting to look for value at this stage of the draft when you start to get into the middle rounds, rather than just kind of guys that are splash guys. Very few splash guys slip through the cracks and make it this far, but there are some interesting names that are out there. Gervin Dexter would be a name. Ricky Stromberg is a name that I think goes a little bit before the fourth round as an interior offensive lineman. He could be a really good pickup for somebody. Um, and then Emil Ekiyor, who we've spoken about in some previous videos, might be a name to look at as well. Uh, a running back name that we could talk about would be Chris Rodriguez out of Kentucky. Very productive back, and the more I watch tape on Kentucky, the more I kind of like what I see. He would be an interesting guy to add to that running back room. I think he could come in and be competitive in there. Probably beat out Salvin Ahmed. But he's a guy that could come in and help out. Xavier Hutchinson would be another interesting name at wide receiver. There are a lot of there. This is kind of a nice sweet spot for your middle round talent, at least when it comes to fantasy. Um, the Dolphins wouldn't be an ideal landing spot for any of these guys because of how talented their roster currently is, but it could be a good NFL landing spot for them, it's kind of setting themselves up for the future. So the draft is not where their focus was this year. They were focusing on doing what they could in free agency since they don't really have a ton of draft capital with which to get better. And I think they did. I think they attacked free agency the best way they could. I do think they got better. I think they can be very competitive in the AFC East as long as Tua can stay healthy. But that's going to do it for me in the breakdown of the Dolphins. As always, we will get another one of these out tomorrow. We will get through every single team before the start of the NFL draft. Once the NFL draft hits and rosters have a chance to shake out a little bit, we will revisit each of these teams and talk a little bit about some fantasy impact, some fantasy forecasting for some of the guys on the rosters, kind of help you plan out your drafts. But as always, if there's any feedback, a guy that you want me to talk about in a future video, somebody that you think I'm wrong on, please let me know. If you have an idea for what team that I should do next, let us know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Would love to interact with more people. But for now, that's going to do it for me. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.